Weekly. My name is Andrew.
My name is Lee.
And let's get right into it. So we're going to go ahead and cover the news first. A little bit of sad news to start things off with, unfortunately. The co-founder of Studio Ghibli, Isao Takahata, passed away last week.
I heard about that.
He was 82, passed away in the hospital in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know who he is the... we just said he's the co-founder of Studio Ghibli, but everything that Miyazaki didn't direct, he directed. He made Grave of the Fireflies, Pompoko, My Neighbors the Amadas, those ones.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm. He's the one who made those ones. And he had several other films kind of brewing and working on in his head. He didn't know if he was going to be able to do those. But the last film that he directed was The Tale of Princess Kaguya back in 2013.
Ah.
So yeah, he passed away this last week, and Miyazaki, I've read a couple of articles about it, and he's still kind of feeling the effects of it. A close friend of his passed away, and apparently it happened pretty suddenly. Different reports apparently are varying, because right here it says he'd been in declining health since last summer. So it could have been coming for a while, but I also remember reading somewhere that it happened pretty suddenly. But not a lot of people are ever really prepared for the death of a close friend.
No.
So our hearts go out to Hayao Miyazaki. I wish we could do something more than that, but lost a close personal friend and an incredible creative mind as well. And it's always sad to see someone pass away. But moving on to our next bit of news. This is something that I'm pretty excited about. One of my favorite shows growing up, one that we're watching with Jasmine on our anime nights now,
yes,
is The Vision of Escaflowne.
It's a fantastic show.
It's a great fantasy anime that appeals to both boys and girls. Girls, because there's a love story, kind of love triangle thing going on during it. Boys, because of the great action scenes, the combat, the giant fantasy mechs and the dragons and things like that. It's a good show for both boys and girls. But the director, Kazuki Akane, he is working on a new series, which is his first original series since 2005. Now, he's done other things. He helped Code Geass Akito the X out. He directed Code Geass series. Mm-hmm. But this is his first original one since 2005. Anyways, trying to see if there's a name. I don't think there's a name for it just yet. He's just kind of shown sketches and artwork and things like that.
By the sketches I've seen that he's posting on Twitter, it looks to be a high school tennis anime.
Yeah, something along those lines. So could be interesting. But yeah, he was one of my favorite directors, or he's done some of my favorite shows back in the day. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with this. It could be as simple as a slice of life, sports anime. But yeah, that's that bit of news.
Okay.
And our next bit of news, which I'm very excited about, is Overlord Season 3.
Yes.
Overlord Season 3 has a date now, July of 2018. I feel like we may have covered this already, but...
We knew it was coming soon. I don't think we had the exact date yet.
Okay. But
we were just surprised that Overlord... they only just barely wrapped up airing Season 2. Mm-hmm. And so to see Season 3 already in production, already ready to go, it's just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to disagree a little bit about the description of the show, because they say, Studio Madhouse and director Naoyuki Ito are continuing the adaptation of the dark fantasy light novel series. Mm-hmm. And as, a fantasy guy myself and an aspiring novelist myself, dark fantasy, I don't know if I would consider Overlord dark fantasy.
The only reason that they could qualify it as dark fantasy is that the protagonist is a villain archetype. But that's about it. That's all it really has going for it in terms of darkness.
But that's not what dark fantasy even is. Dark fantasy is fantasy with horror elements. So, something like Dragon Age Origins, where they had now this is getting a little bit dark for maybe some of our younger viewers, but in the Dragon Age series, there are creatures called I'm forgetting what they're called, but they are Darkspawn. That's what they're called.
Darkspawn.
Darkspawn,
Okay.
And Darkspawn are born by women of normal races, human, elf, and dwarf women, being abducted and having horrifying magical rituals cast upon them that possess their bodies with demons and horrible things, and they become brood mothers. They pretty much just become factories that churn out darkspawn. That's dark fantasy. Things like, and another aspect of it is has to do with demonic possession, where mages, if they're not careful, they will be possessed by demons, who will then turn their horrific powers on the world. That's dark fantasy. Overlord, not so much. I mean, it's got undead in it, but just because it has undead and it's got demons in it, just because it has those things, it doesn't actually make it dark fantasy.
All right.
So, anyways, people throw that term around a lot, and I'm just like, that's not what it's for. Anyways, that's I'm still, regardless of the description, I'm very excited for season 3 of Overlord. I'm very, very looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it.
Me too.
Now, I've talked a lot about the news. How about you? What stuff have you seen that's coming up?
Well, I noticed that My Hero Academia Season 3 started last week.
Yep.
And my poor son, he's gnawing at the bit, wondering why I don't have a paid account to either Crunchyroll or a Verve, because if I did, he'd already be watching it now. But no, he has to wait another week. He's like, Dad, why?
Put your son to work. Have him do a paper route or something like that. Even though those do they even have newspaper routes anymore for kids to make money?
I don't know.
Probably not.
I honestly think that too many adults have taken up paper routes as an extra way of making money. That there's not room for kids to have them anymore.
How many newspapers are around anymore? I mean, let's be honest. Not many.
Definitely not many out here.
Yeah, I don't. I did newspaper routes for like a free newspaper way back in the day. I was paid like half a cent per paper that I delivered.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, it was pennies.
Yeah, and I I don't think that newspaper is around anymore. Anyways, no. Well, I'd let you use my paid for Crunchyroll account, but I don't want to.
No, it's all right. At some point, I'll be able to afford that $10 a month subscription fee. But until then, we'll make do with waiting another week.
Crunchyroll's only $7.
Verve has all of Crunchyroll's content plus some, so I'm looking for that one.
Yeah, I don't much care for Verve. That's not really my cup of tea. But Crunchyroll, I subscribe to that, and I think it's totally worth it. Okay, any other news? Anything else we want to cover today?
That covered it for our news section, I think.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into 3 episodes in. Now, last week we said we were going to be doing Inferno Cop. That was my mistake, though, because Inferno Cop, the longest episode's like 2-3 minutes, so there's not much for us to talk about when it comes to that. So Inferno Cop is not really something that we can cover.
No, I mean... And it's an entertaining little piece if that's your flavor, but it's one of those kind of shows you'd find on Adult Swim between commercial breaks.
Yep, that's.
I mean, it's like an entire episode is about like a Robot Chicken short.
Yep, that makes sense.
So there is a continuing through line between each, but like one thing happens in every episode. 1 or 2 things, and then it's the end. And every last thing that happens is a life-changing, world-shattering something that happened. First episode ended with a pregnant woman's water breaking. The second episode starts with that water having flooded the city. That's the kind of show it is.
Like, it's a very, very silly show, but it's... And if you're into that thing, that's great. And I am into that thing. I mean, it's just a very silly, weird show. And it feels like they knew not to have more than,
not to overstay its welcome.
Not to overstay its welcome, pretty much, yeah. Because shows that's the entire humor, they drag on if they keep going.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we decided to go ahead, and since it was my pick last week, I came up with another show for us to cover. This is an older show. It's classic. It's a comedy. It is a parody anime where each episode makes fun of a different, or makes fun or pokes fun at, not really in a cruel manner, but
it parodies a genre.
It parodies a genre in each episode. And I've seen the entire series before. I don't know if you have, but
this is my first time.
This is your first time watching this?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Because I decided to go ahead and do Excel Saga for 3 episodes in. And oh boy. What a show. Like, I don't know if I said this in the show before, but Cowboy Bebop. Okay? Yes. I watched that way back in 2000, I guess it was 2001 when I first started watching it. That was right after high school.
Okay.
I've just dated myself right there. Oh. Let's pause it real fast. Well, no. You can go ahead and edit this part out. It's not on the 8. I can do it. There we go. Okay. That sounds a lot better to me now.
Yeah, it is.
It wasn't recording my voice. It was recording the echo of my voice.
Oh, yikes.
That's okay. We're still learning stuff. We'll be sure to catch that later.
Yeah, that's something we have to check every morning. I do some other recording over the weekend, and we change settings on this every week. So,
well, anyways, we're gonna go ahead and talk about Excel Saga. And what I was saying is that Cowboy Bebop. It was a show back. I watched it in 2001, and I watched it during its first run and never saw it again until years later. I found a copy of the entire series. Because it was another one of those shows where they sold it, back in the day they would sell 4 or 5 episodes per disc on a DVD and charge you $30 for a single disc. It was outrageous. So and I found the entire collection for about $30, and I was like, well, I'm going to pick this up. This is great. So I picked up Cowboy Bebop, but I never watched it. I just kind of picked it up for nostalgia value. And months down the line, I had some free time. I kind of wanted to watch a show. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to give Cowboy Bebop another try. It's probably nowhere near as good as I remember it being. Looking through it through rose-colored lenses and stuff like that. I remember I was constantly recommending it to people because I absolutely adored it. And then I sat down and I watched Cowboy Bebop, and no, it's just as good as it was. It's a phenomenal show. It's incredible. Excel Saga is the same so far. Where I watched it once years ago, over a decade ago, I watched Excel Saga. Borrowed the DVDs from a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And not he, but, and I watched it. I adored it, devoured it. It was hysterical. Even though going in, I remember a lot of the punchlines. And as I was watching the first 3 episodes, I was like, oh yeah, this is coming up. And it would still make me laugh, Gosh, it's an incredible show. It's funny. What are your thoughts on it, though? I mean, we can't really do our typical format that we've been doing where we can, dissect it episode per episode, because that's not what the show really is. It's not a continuing story.
Right.
It's just parody after parody after parody. So...
what they seem to be doing is introducing characters slowly, episode by episode. And as they're introducing these characters, they'll come back and play more into the story. In the first episode, we get introduced to Excel, her master,
Ipalazo-sama,
and Pedro.
Oh, Pedro.
Oh, and we also get introduced to, what do they call it? The The microcosm.
The great will of the macrocosm.
The great will of the macrocosm.
Now, I knew about the macrocosm, but I never bothered to look up what macrocosm means. Did you look up what the definition of macrocosm is?
No.
Here's what a Google search turned up with their first definition, because usually when you look up a word, it'll give you the definition first. Mm-hmm. The whole of a complex structure, especially the world or universe, contrasted with a small or representative part of it. So she is literally the physical manifestation of their entire universe. That is the great will of the macrocosm.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
That makes sense.
She is a galaxy that goes around, like just a flat image of a galaxy that has woman's arms popped out of it.
Yes. And has her own way of doing things.
Very, very much her own way of doing things.
So the first episode starts with Excel. It looks like she just graduated from high school and is skipping away and getting ready for her first job. She's chanting across, over and over again, whacking students and sending them flying just haphazardly as she's going along.
Trampling students who are confessing to each other on the last day of school. You know, someone's asking her, "Hey, Excel, did you get a job yet?" And she's just saying, "Across, across."
And then she's hit by a truck.
Mm-hmm.
During which, and this is one of my favorite things of this show, she's in an ambulance and being driven away, and her life starts flashing before her eyes in a manner that the EMTs can see.
And the EMTs are commenting on it.
It's like, oh, her life is flashing before her eyes. This is not good.
Well, and the best is that it's the things that are flashing before her eyes are things that actually hasn't happened yet.
Or things that are happening in the story later on.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, they looked somewhat familiar from content I've seen. I've seen enough anime music videos and other content in my life to know when something is from Excel Saga, but I haven't actually watched the show to piece those pieces together. So it's like watching a trailer, but you haven't seen the movie yet. But that just goes for the whole show. So that's my experience with it. So seeing these things finally pieced together. I think I'll be finishing this one.
Yeah, me too. I will probably watch through it again because, oh gosh, it's so good. But yeah.
And then, okay, so every episode starts with a legal disclaimer from the creator saying he gave permission for that episode to exist the way it is. And the first episode, there is well, I need to have it written down. What's his name?
Il Palazzo.
Il Palazzo.
I actually keep a Word document and I write down the names of the characters as they appear.
Yeah. Il Palazzo-sama orders Excel to kill all the manga artists.
Because they are the dregs of society. Yes. And nobody will miss them. And so the first person she's sent to go kill is the personification of the creator of their own universe. Now, manga artists tend to draw themselves in a very, very funny way when they need to draw themselves. And I haven't actually read the manga. I'd like to at some point, but I'm pretty sure, because his face is very, very long and curved, almost like it's almost a moon shape.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's how he draws himself in the comic.
Okay.
So, or that's his self-portrait.
Right.
So, yeah, that's that's the first episode, which brings me to one of the things that I love about the series.
Yes.
The show does a great job of being aware of its manga roots, by bringing in the author every single episode to give the author's literal stamp of approval, because he gives his approval and then boom, the stamp of his name appears.
Yep.
And he gives his stamp of approval. So they're showing respect to that, but at the same time, they are declaring that this is its own entity by literally killing the author of the mangaka, in the first episode.
Yes.
Okay? They're saying, this is our own thing, get out of here.
Yes. Now, that brings me to one of my favorite things about this episode. And it's a throwback, actually, to the old BBC TV show, the 6-episode Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay.
Is that there was a scene where, like, right in that show, right when they're about to be hit by a couple of nuclear missiles, they immediately cut away to images of peaceful tranquility and arrest you and give you assurance that, don't worry, even though the nuclear missiles are coming after our heroes, a series of very improbable events are going to cause them to become a sperm whale and a bowl of petunias. And they just have these glorious scenes of nature happening while it's explaining this to you. And they did the exact same thing in Excel Saga at the moment that they're killing the mangaka. Is that you still hear all the violence, but it's cut away to beaches and forests and meadows. It's like, due to the graphic nature of what you're going to see, here's this.
That's a pretty common running gag in anime, especially for comedy ones.
Yes.
Like one of my favorite ones is that we blew the entire budget on the previous scene, so this is what you get now. Instead of seeing this awesome fight scene, you see like a little kitten or something crawling across the screen while you're hearing sounds of battle going on. So
there's a point in the 3rd episode where something blows up and they cut to a live action squib going off that somebody shot. It's just here's a live action squib on a black background in the middle of the show, instead of an actual animated explosion.
Now, going back to the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm,
yes,
Excel dies multiple times,
repeatedly.
She dies. One of my favorite parts is just the death count of Excel, just because they're showing you this is just a silly, silly show, okay? It's just silly. She dies 5 times in the first episode, 4 of which happen before the credit cut, or the commercial cut, okay?
And the will of the great macrocosm brings her back every time.
Pretty sure it's either 2 or 3. She's killed by Lord Il Palazzo.
Yes.
Because she's annoying him.
Yes.
Then she's constantly declaring her obnoxious teenage girl love for him. But going back to the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm, they're bringing this character in as a way to circumvent the fact that characters die, just in a humorous manner. Like the first time Excel dies, it's before even the opening credits of the show. She gets hit by this truck outside of her school, and then she dies she doesn't just see her life flashing before her eyes, she dies. Like her hand goes limp.
Her spirit is floating in the cosmos.
And then suddenly the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm, thank you. The Great Wheel of the Macrocosm starts talking to her, and she says the line, "You must not die the moment the show starts. Life is valuable, but more than that, consider the storyline."
Yes. The story is more important than you're dying right now, so here you go. You're living again.
And every time Il Palazzo kills her, you see in the background...
just passing by.
Yeah, the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm. I used to say it in a completely different way years ago, so that's throwing me off, but it's the macrocosm. I used to say macrocosm or something like that. But the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm, you just see her going, so little to do, so much to do, so little time, stuff like that. Every time Excel dies and gets brought back, you see the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm somewhere.
Yes.
And then throughout the next 2 episodes, even though they've already established that if she dies, she'll just come back, the Great Wheel of the Macrocosm is a bit busy doing other things and can't come to help Excel on a moment's notice. Yeah. So how about we talk about Pedro a bit, because that's a good...
Oh, Pedro. I just put his name as one of my favorite things on this list. He's just... Oh, Pedro, that poor, poor man.
My tears are flowing like waterfalls.
So, In the first episode, it's established that Pedro has a sexy wife and a cute son.
And they call her sexy wife and cute son.
That's all they know them as.
Well, no, we know the son's name as, I wrote it down. His name is Sandora,
yes,
but we don't learn the wife's name.
Yeah, they interact with each other that way, but every other character only knows that Pedro has a sexy wife and a cute son. And that exact expression is used over and over again. Oh. So, Excel and he have a secret handshake, and they know each other well, or something like that. And they're working at a job site at the beginning of the first episode. They're working together at a construction site,
building a new skyscraper or something,
a new high-rise of some type. And Excel is directing traffic, but she's too spastic to do it accurately. She's causing cars to pirouette and causing traffic jams of all kinds of natures.
The entire time she's praising the great Lord Il Palazzo because this world needs his leadership. This world is rotten. It's dying. Look at all this horrible, like she causes a massive traffic jam because of her terrible directing, not realizing what's going on. And then she pulls out a notebook thinking, once Il Palazzo takes over, we're going to have to get rid of cars. There's just way too many of them. It's just a mess.
And then while doing that, she looks up and sees Pedro sitting on an I-beam, despondent, sad. She goes to cheer him up, and then she's like, "Why are you sad?" He says, "Because I miss my wife, my sexy wife, and my cute son." And she pulls out some brass knuckles and beats some sense into him. Like that seems a little
spiked brass knuckles.
Spiked brass knuckles, and like, this seems a bit excessive. And then she proceeds to give him a pep talk, and his tears of forlornness become tears of joy, still water falling down his face, as he works hard to be home, to eventually get home to his wife and son. And then Excel proceeds to pray some more, causing a major traffic jam, causing the entire building, and causing a traffic accident, which results in an explosion, which results in the entirety of the structure that they've been working on to catch fire and start burning down. And because Pedro lost a photo of his son in that fire, he gets trapped in it and is going to burn to death. When the great will of the macrocosm comes in to save him, and then something beeps and he goes, "Oh, gotta go," and leaves him in the fire to die. Pedro then makes an appearance in the 2 subsequent episodes as a tragic figure who is being kept to the interests of the great will of the macrocosm.
There's a symbolism there. It keeps getting worse for Pedro as the series goes, where he is getting pretty much...
Literally the entire universe of this story is screwing with him.
Yeah. That's a very, very rated PG way of saying it. Thank you very much.
You bet.
But yeah. It's a visual gag that his life keeps getting worse. And it's because the universe is screwing with him.
Cigarette and all.
The next time you see Pedro, he is laying down in a futon, just like, wait, I'm alive? What's going on? And he wakes up thinking that he was burning to death. And then suddenly you hear the great will of the macrocosm saying, "Oh, so you're awake now." And he turns over and he sees the universe with her female arms and everything laying down in the futon next to him with a cigarette.
Yes. The post-colloidal cigarette meme.
Yep. So, yeah. You may have to be a little bit older to be able to get that joke. But anyways.
Fortunately, it's subtle enough that it's not too obvious.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so, okay, next up, how about you talk about Menchie?
Oh, Menchie. Menchie is a stray dog that Excel finds and chooses to adopt because she's hungry and needs food, and brings him home to cook and eat. And then every once in a while decides not to cook and eat him, but to save him for later.
Because Menchie is her emergency food fund.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He's her emergency food storage.
He keeps this poor little dog, this little female dog named Menchie, as her emergency food supply.
And he's aware of it and is trying to get away as hard as he can.
There's this one scene where her neighbor is trying to get some sleep, she lives in a tiny little apartment with super thin walls and stuff like that, and like even show like just by slapping the walls at one point, the walls start falling apart. That's how poor they are.
Yeah, they start cracking around through the other side.
Well, Menchie's trying to get out while Excel's at work.
Yes.
And she is her part-time job in this next episode. She is writing she's doing newspaper delivery.
Yes.
Out in this rainstorm.
In a rainstorm that's causing a flood that brings the flood waters to just below the basket level of her newspapers on her bike as she's riding it along.
Yep. And also, their underground, across his underground hideout is being flooded.
Actively. And while he's debriefing her on the next thing, the dais on which the Lord is on continues rising above the water level, and she still has to tread water to continue with the... And then he gets a phone call, and he's like, yeah, hello. Just ignores her for a minute, turns back, and she's already drowned.
And she's gone. He's like, oh, well, she's a go-getter, isn't she? Something like that. Anyways, this poor dog, fully aware of the fact that if, she stays around, Excel will eat her.
Yes.
And so she's trying to get out of the apartment, but she's making a lot of noise doing it by like slamming in the door and stuff like that, and it's annoying the neighbor. The neighbor comes over, bangs on the door, realizes the door is unlocked and opens it, and then Menchie
is surrounded by glorious cherubim
and a rainbow and happy
and the Hallelujah chorus.
I don't think it was that, but close enough.
It was something. It might be joy, like either joy to the world or ode to joy.
I think it may have been ode to joy.
Ode to joy.
We're probably butchering it. Anyways, I should have written down what the song was because it's a actual classical song.
Yes.
But Menchie gets super excited and then leaves the apartment and jumps out and starts swimming away to freedom. And as Menchie's swimming away to freedom, she's so excited, so happy, surrounded by these angels. She doesn't realize that she's paddling right next to Excel on her bicycle.
Who Excel then proceeds to jump off her bicycle, chase after Menchie, and then tie her to her head with a bandana.
And she's unable to find her bicycle after that.
Which floats right behind her.
Which then floats right behind her as she realizes that, I only turned away for 30 seconds to a minute. Those thieves are super fast.
Because that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. That poor dog, though. That poor dog. It's another thing that's like Pedro, where you get so happy for that dog, and then more horrible things happen. Like, for some reason, I forget. Do you remember why? The show doesn't need a reason for why it goes to the places that it goes to, but it does anyways. I mean, one of the things that I wrote down are the Poochus.
Oh yes,
the most adorable race of galactic conquerors ever. They are... Imagine a race of Hello Kitties.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wearing big pink diapers. They have like fly swatter looking scepters and things like that. And everything they say is Poochu, 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 Poochu,
yes.
Poochu. And they're super adorable. Until they get hit by something. And once they get hit by something, their faces suddenly turn into overly chiseled manly man faces from like Fist of the North Star, things like that.
Yes, where their eyebrow thickness features half of their face.
Mm-hmm. And these aliens, well, that's right, that's what happens. The ship blows up and she ends up flying into the Amazon or whatever.
She finds one. But the way it goes is she finds one, and she goes, "You're so cute. I don't care," and karate chops him.
And then
and then his gun ends up in her possession. She then proceeds to determine that this gun must have been special delivered from her master and attempts to use it. And out comes this cute little pink cloud of smoke. And she berates the gun for its poor performance, and the gun apologizes.
And the gun
profusely
apologizes.
Audibly. It speaks with a male voice and says, "I shall endeavor to improve myself."
And then it does as she pulls the trigger again, and this massive beam of energy comes up and hits a spaceship in the sky, the very Star Destroyer looking spaceship in the sky.
Yes. Literally, it's just a giant triangle. And then that was the invading force.
Of Poochus.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of better explain the Poochus, within an Excel Saga, and you haven't really seen, you've kind of seen hints of this. In Excel Saga, there is a story that's going on, but it takes place in the background.
Yeah.
That Excel is not aware of in the slightest.
No.
And one of the central characters for that of that story is Nabishin.
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 The Afro Man.
Let me tell you something about Nabishin. That's the director. He inserted himself into Excel as the coolest character in Excel.
Every time he shows up, he introduces himself for no reason. It's like everybody's like...
Nabishin.
Everybody's talking about, "Oh, hello, and I'm so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so," and he's there for no reason, and I'm Nabishin.
I'm Nabishin. But... anyways, Nabishin gets up onto that ship because he's friends with a character named the Space Butler.
The Space Butler.
Who has currently been taken captive with his princess, who's currently in a coffin,
yes,
from Mars, by the Poochus. And as much as he tries to fight against them, he can't, because whenever he raises a hand against them, they overwhelm the Space Butler with their cuteness. And just like, oh, so cute.
And he is unable to withstand their advances.
Their adorableness. Kitten fight. No, I'm allergic to adorableness. Ah, boom.
And that's your daily ASDF.
Your ASDF films. Your ASDF movies. Anyways, yeah. And so the Poochus then get defeated because Excel gets up onto their ship. She finds one of their landing pods, proceeds to kick the crap out of everything in there because everybody is affected by their cuteness except for her because she's too dumb.
Yes.
Okay? She's like, "Oh, you're so cute. So what?" And she'll just beat the crap out of them because they're cute. She doesn't know what they're up to. I was going to let you cut that out. She doesn't know how. She doesn't understand their cuteness. That doesn't affect her. She's too stupid. And then she takes their shuttle to get back up to the ship. She crashes it into the ship, and then proceeds to just fire the gun around because obviously it's a tool meant for helping her from her master to help them conquer the city. And they're planning on conquering the city because it's going to be a test run for them conquering the world later on. But she keeps blowing things up, and because of that, Nabishin's able to get up onto the ship as well and try to defeat the Poochus with Space Butler, but they end up being overwhelmed by their cuteness and, explosions. They're able to overcome their cuteness because they see their true horrific manly faces when some of them get knocked unconscious by debris falling from the ceiling.
Yep.
And then they escape. Well, Nabishin and the princess in the coffin escape. Space Butler sacrifices himself to explode the ship in the sky. And Excel, who is still on the ship, gets launched away into the jungles, and that's where the second episode ends. Third episode, the first episode was just they have my permission to do whatever they want with the series, so they're going to kill him. Second episode is they have my permission to make this into a sci-fi. Into a sci-fi. Third episode is they have my permission to turn this into a crappy B action movie.
Which opens up with the most amazing... a general and his subordinate are in a helicopter speaking English, saying, Why are we flying around? There is no mission. We're just here to start a B-action movie.
We're here to be the footage for the B-action movie.
And they say it in English, in the original Japanese.
They say it in pretty terrible English.
Yes.
Well, anyways. Long story short, Excel and Minchi wind up in the jungle. Minchi befriends some soldiers. Excel gets captured by those soldiers. She tries to escape, gets captured again, and gets thrown into a prison and meets somebody in the prison by the name of... Tetchin. And the somehow our princess has woken up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. Because Nabashina and the princess are just kind of falling out of the ship, her coffin...
Her coffin ends up in the flooded...
area, and then she wakes up.
Of the layer. Mm-hmm. She wakes up, and immediately Lord Iloplazo assumes she's... because of the way she's dressed, she must have been special delivered to be his next servant.
Mm-hmm. And immediately starts putting her to work. You said, and the next episode, she gets sent off to find Excel. Her running gag, though, is that she's one of those characters who's beautiful but has poor health. So, it's one of those tragic stories where they're going to fall in love with someone but they die before, ever being with them or something like that.
Yes.
But they take it to the extreme because this is Excel Saga, and she dies right in front of Il Palazzo probably about a dozen times.
Yes.
At least half a dozen.
Keeps getting up. Like, no, I can hear you. Keep going.
And then as soon as he turns around again and starts like giving his monologue, she falls over dead again.
Yep. Eventually, she ends up just having to worm crawl out of the place because she can't be bothered to be on her feet.
She doesn't have the strength, and her name is Hyatt.
Hyatt. Yes, like the hotel chain.
Mm-hmm. She is So her Excel's running gag is that she's an idiot who's constantly getting killed, and Hyatt is that she's a sweetheart who is too sick to live. She dies usually.
She's in the opening credits sequence from episode 1, and they're doing the pop idol thing where they're singing and dancing in front of a crowd, and Hyatt keeps coughing in the middle of the lyrics during the opening credits song.
Mm-hmm.
That's how important this part of the character is that they will interrupt.
Well,
they'll interrupt the opening credits song to have her cough.
I'm glad you stopped yourself from saying beautiful, because it's not beautiful.
It's not beautiful.
It's obnoxious, and it's supposed to be. It's obnoxious, and it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But it's...
I stopped myself because it was not the right word to choose.
Oh, gosh. Anyways, she's then sent on to go and find Excel. But she is crawling her way through the city, and she's, like you said, she's worm crawling her way through the city because she doesn't have the strength to move.
She gets stopped by a pile of pizza boxes in the street, and somebody lifts it up for her, and she just keeps going.
The neighbor who let Minchi out lifts it up. Yes. He's having a hard time with his roommates, because they're a bunch of lazy good-for-nothings, and he's decided he's done with them, he's going to move out, and he then meets this gorgeous woman
who tells him that happens to be moving into the address of the apartment next door to him.
She's moving in apartment 204, and he's in apartment 203, and she's like, oh, I'm in apartment 203, I'm your neighbor. And she's like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. And he's just like, he immediately decides to go back and move in with his horrible roommates again because this beautiful woman is moving in next door. Anyways, going back to Excel, Nabashine shows up.
Yes. Nabashine shows up to rescue them because it's Nabashine.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't the first time he's pulled something out of his hair, but it's the first. But the thing that they've been thrown into a pit, and to get them out, he pulls out a rope and grappling hook from his afro, and then saves Tetchin, but not Excel.
Tetchin, who he actually starts calling by a different name, Tetsuko. Which is a female's name, which is very, very funny because Tetchin has a metal mask over the face with like an actual a palm tree on the head for
Yes.
some reason, and is wearing very, very thick robes, and speaks with a very, very manly, deep voice.
Which doesn't change.
Well, we're not there just yet. But yeah, when the mask comes off, it doesn't change. But Tetchin, one of my favorite things, and this didn't translate too well in the subtitles. They would change it for English to make it work in English. But Tetchin and Excel were playing a game of Shiritori,
Yes.
which I thought was very, very delightful. And it did, most of the time it did work using it in English. But do you know what Shiritori is?
What I could tell from what they were playing is that they would keep naming foods, but is there something more to it than that?
There's something a lot more to it than that. Shiritori, it's not just like they were doing it as foods. Maybe that was their own variation of it.
Uh-huh.
But Shiritori is a Japanese game where you say a word, and the last sound of that word needs to be the first sound of the word the next player says.
Oh, I see.
And you cannot end the word with n, which is a sound that no word starts with.
Right.
So, I mean, nani, nune, no, that's something that the words can end with and start with.
Right,
But there's a sound that there's just an sound. No word starts with just So if you do that, you've lost.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm. But that's Shiritori.
Okay.
And they were playing it, and it actually worked pretty well in English. But it was, they'd say, excuse me. They would say the word in Japanese, and somehow that word would translate into English with the last letter being the first letter of the next word.
Oh, I see.
So I thought that worked pretty well. But anyways, Tetsuko gets saved, and
Yes.
Nabashin and Excel's just like, no, what about me? Aren't you going to save me? And Nabashin's response is, you're too heavy. Which, of course, causes Excel to freak out because she's a girl.
Yes.
And Nabashin eventually gets so tired of her whining that he goes back down and opens up an emergency exit door that happens
A labeled
emergency exit.
Yes.
Right behind Excel, rather than having Excel climb up the rope.
Oh. And then after they've gotten back up and they're trying to get away from the soldiers that notice they escaped, he pulls a very large rifle out of his hair and gives it to Excel.
A shotgun.
And Excel says, "That's some dandruff you have there, mister."
Mm-hmm. And then Nabashin and Tetsuko run off skipping together, arm in arm. And she's just like, you got what? Now you're skipping? Okay, whatever. And then she just kind of goes off on her own. It cuts back to Tetsuko and Nabashin, and Tetsuko somehow gets bitten by an anaconda. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but they're not poisonous. I don't think so. They're like...
no, they're just big. I think they're a constrictor type.
Yeah, they're a constrictor type. But
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because Tetsuko gets poisoned by this anaconda. They tries to rip Tetsuko out, but ends up ripping out only Tetsuko's top half. And then... I
could feel the poison going through me. Well, you should be more worried about your top half.
And Tetsuko says to remove the mask, and
she ends up being this beautiful bombshell from the lake of Galaxy Express 999.
Galaxy Express 999, or what's another one of the shows, like 70s sci-fi anime, you know?
Yeah, Captain Harlock.
Captain Harlock, you know, one like drawn in a very specific style.
Yes, just a very specific, very small mouth, beautiful, huge eyelashes,
long nose,
flowing blonde hair. It's that very specific archetype that doesn't match with the 80s.
And as beautiful as she is, her voice is still the exact same.
Yes.
It's a grizzled old man.
It's the grizzled old man voice.
Mm-hmm. And she starts talking to Nabashin, saying, can we do that one more time? And Nabashin says yes. And he goes down, and Nabashin's face is suddenly drawn as the male protagonist style in one of those shows.
Yes.
Where, they've got the sweeping hair that's like covering one of their eyes, but it's his curly afro somehow now covering one of his eyes. And just as they're about to kiss, the leader of this military group that had captured Excel shows up and shoots Tetsuko.
Yeah. And then for whatever reason, just as she's about to say her last dying words, there's a train. There's a train going through the middle of the jungle where there was never any tracks.
Because, once again, that's a trope where a character's dying words, you don't really hear what they say. I mean, I've been watching more of the, or it's not just that, but sometimes, the character will say something and we're not supposed to hear it just yet.
No, yeah.
So it's done silently, but we see the other character's reactions to it.
Yes.
But yeah, as she's dying, the train comes by out of nowhere. They're in the middle of a jungle and suddenly there's a rail crossing and a train going by. But I've been watching more of a certain magical index.
Yes.
And in order to save one of the characters, Tolma fights one of the most powerful espers in the city in order to save someone else.
Yes.
And this character says, and this villain eventually says, "Why did you do this for this person?" And he. Oh no, this is a different part. But anyways, he says something, but what he says is silent. And he can't hear it. And the girl that he saved overhears it, and we see her face just go beet red, and she starts blushing, and there could have very easily been steam coming off of her ears.
Okay.
And she just says, "That idiot. Why would he say something like that?" Okay? And just like, "Oh, are you serious?" But yeah, that's what they're making fun of in that scene.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
But and then Nabashin, who has the best afro in the world.
Yes. Pulls 2 AKs.
He pulls one of them is I'm pretty sure one of them is a 50 cal machine gun, and the other one is just another, I don't know what it is, but it's just another massive machine gun. He pulls them out and he rushes this army by himself. Scene cut to Excel getting away, but she gets
and finds Menchie.
And she's about to go for Menchie, but Menchie, who had been taken in by these army guys, and they built her a dog house, and doing all these great things for her, feeding her snacks.
Renaming her Mickey.
Renaming her Mickey after a friend of theirs
who had died earlier
off camera and stuff. And they and these guys come in to defeat Excel and kill Excel because she's escaping them when the battle with Nabashin claims their lives as well.
Yes.
And so she gets Menching, and she ties Menching to her chest.
To her chest this time.
And leaves. And Menching's just super distraught because once again, this chance at happiness has been ripped away from her paws.
Yes. And then finally, it's the next morning, and Hyatt leaves her new apartment to go trying to find, and only has Excel's photo. And for whatever reason, the jungle she's in is just around the corner from her own apartment.
It's this great comedic moment where she's like, "Oh, I've got to find this girl, but I've only got her photo." And Excel's just like, food. I'm so hungry, because it's been over a week now since she's actually eaten.
It's the end of episode 3. She has yet to eat anything.
Mm-hmm. And she's just like,
she's been hungry since
so
episode
hungry,
1.
and she just keeps walking, and she just keeps going, and you see this great shot where Excel's walking through the jungle and Hyatt is walking through the city, and there's a white line dividing them.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, they turn them and they go, "Huh?" And as they're looking at each other, the white line disappears, and the jungle is the next block from Excel's apartment.
Yes. For whatever reason, her apartment in the middle of the city is also right next to the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hyatt dies and falls into her arms.
She's like, "Wait, what's going on here?
I just met you. You just died?
What's going on?"
And then it cuts to Pedro, who is finally coming home. And he sees his son running towards him. And the son runs through him to to the mother. And he turns around and sees the mother, and they walk right through him. And they turn around, and they go home to another man
They go home to a man named Gomez.
Gomez, who has taken Pedro's place.
And taken his place extremely well.
He fits better. He looks like he's a better fit for the family style, like animation wise. As a character design, he looks like he fits better.
And the mom says, "Oh, little Sandora, he's so happy. He's grown so attached to you." And the Gomez says, "Oh, I hope he's not the only one." And she goes, "Oh, you." And they just go in behind the door and just see poor Pedro.
Waterfalls.
Oh, Pedro. Oh,
and it's
man.
just going to get sadder and sadder.
It gets worse for him, okay? It gets so much worse. But the thing about Excel is that it just keeps getting better and better and better. I highly recommend this series to anybody who hasn't seen it. It's on Crunchyroll right now. It's on Funimation. You have no reason not to watch it. It's just an incredible show. It's on VRV if you have that.
Yes.
Each episode makes fun of a different genre until the final 3 of the last 4 episodes, where they save it for making fun of specific shows. Galaxy Police 9, or whatever that show is, 999.
Galaxy Express.
Galaxy Express 999. Or that, or Captain Harlock.
It's one of those. It's a very specific style.
It's one of those. Fist of the North Star. Dragon Ball Z.
Yes. Okay.
Their final episode is a Dragon Ball Z mockery. Okay? The final episode that matters.
The final episode that matters.
Don't watch episode 26.
There's no need.
Do not watch episode 26. It was the last episode, and they realized they could get away with things that they couldn't because the show was over, so they couldn't get canceled because the show was over anyways. It has a lot of adult humor in it and
adult content.
And adult content in it. So if you're not okay with that sort of thing, do not watch the last episode. But the entire story wraps up by episode 25 anyways.
So you don't even need it. And literally they called the episode Going Too Far. Mm-hmm. And yes, it goes too far.
It goes too far. So if that doesn't bother you, whatever, watch it. If it does bother you, it's very, very adult in its humor. It's making fun of those things, so it's still got that Excel comedy, but you don't have to watch it. Yeah. But anyways,
we highly recommend the first 96% of it.
What story they have ends by episode 25, and oh gosh, the show is just so good. And you've pulled up a scene with the closing credits. The closing credits is poor Menchie pleading for her life. She sings, ow, 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 ow. And there's this
translator.
There's a translator standing there with a book translating what Menchie is singing. And while Menchie is singing passionately, this translator is just so distant and so dispassionate. She's just reading what Menchie is singing. Yeah, watch this show. It's fantastic. It's so fun. Once again, don't watch episode 26 if that sort of stuff bothers you. Episodes 1 through 25 has none of that. It's, well, except for, what's the visual joke of what's happening to Pedro.
There's some visual innuendo, but it's not graphic.
No, it's not graphic at all. But, yeah, it's a phenomenal show. I highly recommend it. Now, I picked last week. I guess that kind of wraps up 3 episodes in.
Yes, it does.
Anything else that you want to cover before we go on?
Let's just talk about what we're going to watch next week.
Okay, I picked last week, so it's your turn for this week.
All right, this week I'm picking Psycho Pass.
Okay.
I've heard some interesting things about it. I've been told it's one of those anime that kind of plays with reality, plays with your mind as you're watching it, and I think you recommended it to me at one point because it had some similarity to like Serial Experiments Lane or something along those lines.
Possibly. I've never actually seen it.
Okay.
Psycho Pass is one of the ones I've never seen. So.
All right, so neither have I. So we'll both be going into this fresh next week.
Okay.
All right, so tune in next week and we'll get our 3 episodes in for Psycho Pass.
Awesome. And now that we've finished that portion, how about we go on to recommendation of the week?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and recommend a video game this week. In fact, this video game was the reason that I actually bought a PS4 when I found out they had remastered it and gotten it ready.
Okay.
I recommend Journey. Journey is a really fun game that plays with the stereotypical archetypes of the hero's journey as explained by Joseph Campbell's A Hero in his book The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he deconstructs hundreds and hundreds of heroes' journeys to their core essence and finds out what thread seems to be most familiar with all of them. And this game literally puts you in the protagonist seat of one of those kind of journeys, of that journey. You go through the 8 stages of what he describes as the call to action, the rising action, the trials, the ups and downs that you go through it. I can't remember the exact names for all 8 phases, but you do go through each one of those very specifically. It has beautiful music, beautiful visuals. The way the game plays is you play as a bipedal figure. You just have 2 legs. You don't even have arms. You're robed mysteriously. And as you progress through the game, you will occasionally meet another person who looks just like you if you're connected online at the same time. What the programmers have done is they've created a system where if you're online and someone else is online, and people start the same level at roughly the same time, they will meet. But there's no way of interacting with the person you've just met apart from a single chime button. So you have to kind of play.
Do you mean communicate or interact? Because you can interact with
them. You can
them.
absolutely interact, but there's no text messaging or dialogue system for direct communication with another player.
You said interact. So I just wanted to make sure the listeners understood. Yeah.
Okay. And the game's designed to want that cooperating is better for you. You end up having this scarf, which is an indicator of your flying power. And the more you collect these glowing talismans throughout the game, the longer your scarf gets. And there are creatures that will attack you and shorten your scarf if they get the chance. And basically, however long your scarf is, gives you flying powers, and it uses that up until you've used it up. There are other creatures in the game that if you interact with them, they regenerate the power of it. But so too does being near another player. If you're side by side with each other, you automatically recharge each other. And so the game was designed to get you to cooperate with the other player that gets thrown into the game with you.
Cool.
And I played this and played it all the way through 3 times the first day I had it.
Wow. That's a lot.
That is a lot. But it's only a 1-hour playthrough.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
So you can get through the game in 1 hour, but I highly recommend playing it over and over again and experiencing, and it's slightly different every time because you can experience it as a newbie. You can maybe get paired with a mentor, and as you're a mentor, you might get paired with a newbie, and you can help them along and find the little things that you found in previous playthroughs. And it's a fun little way to spend an afternoon.
Yeah, okay.
So that's my recommendation of the week.
Have you played Abzu?
I have not played Abzu yet.
It's made by the same people. Similar, only it's an underwater thing.
Right.
Rather than a desert journey thing.
Right.
So I heard great things about that. You might want to check that one out.
I think I've already picked it up from the from my PlayStation Plus. Yep, I just haven't opened it up
I've
yet.
had it for a while, but I didn't realize it was made by the same people. As soon as I did, I downloaded it, and I'm going to play it here in the near future. But I'm still playing the crap out of Monster Hunter 5 and Monster Hunter World and Far Cry 5.
Of course you are.
So I'm pretty busy with those things. Okay.
Why wouldn't you be?
I guess it's time for us to move on to Creator Shoutout.
Yep.
All right, Creator Shoutout this time is me. Meaning I get to pick the shoutout.
Yes, we're not just shouting out to you.
I would like to give a shout out to Rich Burlew. Rich Burlew is the creator of Order of the Stick.
I love that comic.
Those of you who don't know what Order of the Stick is, it is a Dungeons and Dragons themed comic where the characters are very much aware that they are in a game.
Yes.
Okay. If not in a game, they're very much aware of the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. They're always making jokes about +1 this, or they go from 3.0 to 3.5 during it, and they find themselves with new weapons and like, oh, hey, bards can wear chainmail now. Awesome, things like that. So,
one of the earliest gags in this comic is a halfling. There's ninja orcs all around them, and he goes, hold on a second. I think I just failed a spot check. And then the orcs say, guys, we're right here. Hold on. I think I just failed a listen check.
Yeah, they're very, very much aware that of the rules of D&D, and that's one of the things that makes it work. Yes. There's a lot of D&D inspired comics out there, or stories out there. Like we kind of talked about this last week, where you got some great stories that you can do with Dungeons and Dragons, but a lot of times you read it and you're like, oh gosh, I can see the dice roll, or I can see the dice rolling in my head throughout this entire combat encounter. Yeah. Or things like that. It's just very, very poorly written, I want to say. Whereas Order of the Stick embraces that and turns it into a joke. Yes. Okay. And
they make it work.
He has recently posted page 1116.
Oh wow! I am so behind on this.
You are very behind on this.
I am very behind.
Yeah. The Order of the Stick is phenomenal. It's hysterical. It's well written. There are plot holes, but of course there's going to be plot holes in a comic that it's mostly just done by one person, and there's limits to what one person can do. But the art style is very, very simple. He pretty much does it I don't know if he does it in now, but back in the day it was pretty much MS Paint that he did it in. Made very, very simple stick figures and things. Yes. But yeah, Order of the Stick, done by Rich Burlew. You can go ahead and Google it. It's very, very simple to find. Or you can just go ahead and go to giantitp.com. The website is Giant in the Playground, so giantitp.com, and you'll find it right there. Okay, yep. I highly recommend it. Once again, it's fantastic. It's lighthearted, while at the same time having serious overtones. I can't recommend it enough.
Fantastic.
Okay. Anything else we want to cover today?
I think that wraps it up for today.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in this week. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here, and we will talk to you guys next week. Have a great week.
See you around.